The C70 is the nearly perfect camera for me and my shooting style, and I decided to scream it from the rooftops. There is one thing that I feel like the camera is missing though, and that is real IBIS. It has digital internal IS, but can that really be used professionally? Can it be counted on? What does it look like when that digital IS fails? And what does it look like compared to real lens IS that I'm used to? A big thank you to my girlfriend Rachel for letting me film her in her kitchen. These tests were filmed on my Sigma 50mm art lens, which does not have any lens stabilization. Here we are handheld. The internal stabilization for the C70 is turned off, so there is no stabilization in the body or the lens. Pretty bad. A 50mm focal length on a Super 35 camera looks like crap, and it screams amateur. So now let's try putting on the C70's internal digital IS. I'd say it takes away like 50% of the shakiness that I don't like, but there's no denying that jitters are still there. Now for a frame of reference, let's look at the lens IS in my 70-200. Just to see what 70mm looks like in this framing, here it is with no lens IS and no camera IS, just handheld. And it looks like an earthquake. So now I turned it on the lens and off in the body to look at just the lens IS. I love this. Just a little bit of floatiness. I wish all of my lenses had this. And now if we pull out the big guns and add digital IS to this lens IS, double IS'd, digital plus lens. It also looks great. It might be a little bit more steady. I feel like it still floats around, but then once it kind of finds its footing, it locks on a bit more if the digital is paired with the lens. Because both these ISs work differently, so it makes sense that they kind of complement each other. Now, just for funsies, let's punch into 200mm. No micro jitters, just some nice floatiness. Look at that, looks great. After that first batch of tests, I realized that I also wanted to compare this to a shoulder rig, a piece of equipment I used all the time when I was getting started out with DSLRs and working with smaller form factor bodies. Since I got my C100 Mark II, it just kind of went out of commission. But yeah, how does this new, high-tech digital IS solution compare to the old-fashioned prosumer, hyper-affordable option? I'll put up on the screen how much this thing costs. Back in the day, I also sprung for those nifty counterweights, so, we're going all out here. Digital IS is off. This is just the shoulder rig, fully analog. I would say that there are jitters, but there are not micro jitters, perhaps. You can be the judge. Now again, just so we have control, let's look at the 50mm in this framing, handheld with no stabilization whatsoever. It probably goes somewhere between, for me, lens IS, which is the best, and C70's IS, which didn't really do much. I think the shoulder rig kind of lives in between those two options. Now if I throw on that 70-200 again, so we can compare the shoulder rig to lens IS, occasionally it jerks a little bit, but like 85% of the time it looks great. So if I'm editing footage that was shot in this way, I'm gonna have to edit around those jerks, but all the footage between the jerks is perfect. It gives me those pockets of great footage, whereas if it was just straight handheld with no stabilization and no shoulder rig, everything would be shaky. Let's double up again. Once I get my positioning, this almost looks like a still frame. It's so sticky. The digital does a pretty good job, I think, at reinforcing the lens IS, even though it doesn't really do that much on its own. And this is not even against my body. This is 2 points of contact, just being held out with my hands. This shit's great. But my next big question is, how do these compare to stabilization in Premiere, which is another type of, quote, digital IS, which is one though that you can kind of dial in more than the blanket digital IS in the camera. Let's apply it to the shakiest clip with no lens IS and no digital IS. The warp stabilizer worked great on that. So straight up handheld, looks like garbage. Premiere warp stabilizer punches in a little bit and looks nice and floaty, very similar to the lens IS. C70's digital IS takes away some jitters, but there's still a bunch of jitters. Now both digital IS and Premiere's warp stabilizer, I think, looks just as good as the Premiere does on its own. But this option is by far the tightest because you punched in already in the camera and then you punched in again inside Premiere. Because warp stabilizer works fine on its own, I'd say you never really want to do this because then you're unnecessarily sacrificing field of view for no real stabilization gain. But I guess this is just a testament to how great warp stabilizer is in Premiere. Even at the stock settings, I didn't play with the percentage of warp or anything like that. Now lastly, as far as glitches go, I know it's possible for the lens to accidentally track a subject when the stabilizer is on because it thinks that the camera's moving when the subject moves. And I tried to replicate this for a few minutes with my phone, and I did eventually get it to do it once. But I really had to try. I just wouldn't have it on a locked off shot. There's no reason to, because if you do accidentally leave it on a locked off shot, this could happen. Anyone out there ever Hollywood their own diffusion? How does that look? In conclusion, can I trust this professionally if I really quickly need to grab a shot? No, I don't think I can with most lenses. Like with the 50mm I ran these tests with, it's still too shaky. I'm gonna put it in Premiere, I guess, to stabilize it if I have to shoot handheld, but I'm probably gonna try to put it on a gimbal or on a tripod or on a shoulder rig or something. Wider than 50 though, like the 18 to 35, especially at 18, I think I would trust it. It does something. Anything more telephoto though, no. The glitches aren't as bad as I thought they'd be. Maybe, you know, I'll eat those words, we'll see. But I don't think that's like a major deterrent for using it. It's just the fact that it doesn't work very well. Okay, that's it. Bye. So this video was complete and I uploaded it to YouTube. I gave it a quick QC on my phone the next morning. I realized that those micro jitters that were super apparent on my 27-inch iMac are almost indecipherable on my little iPhone SE. So if you're watching this on a phone and you're like, this dude's screaming about nothing, I barely see those jitters. I agree with you. One last thing I do need to mention is that I'm not using any RF lenses. According to this really janky video I found on Canon's YouTube, RF lenses work a little bit better with the digital IS than adapted lenses do. So if you shoot RF instead of EF, then your results might actually be quite a bit better than mine. I'm not really sure. I haven't shelled out that kind of cash. All right, that's the end for real. Bye.